are on podcasts all the time and you get asked the same questions often, right? Which a
Yes.
lot of those are about your story, right? How you got started in this space. And I know you tell that story again and again and again. You know, you started this when you were young, you got involved in real estate, you've scaled this thing slowly and methodically over the years. But I'm really curious. We've talked over the years here, and I've always been so interested in your story. But there's things that, when you're telling the grandiose picture that people miss. And so I'd love to dial in on some of those things because I think they're really interesting and really unique. And so let's go to some of those pivot points maybe in your career, right? When you had moved to California, right, from New York, you were buying real estate. Actually, you were a real estate agent, right? And you were
Yeah.
trying to list properties, you were listing properties, and then you started buying that real estate. I'm curious at that first kind of pivot point there. Could you tell us that story a little bit and then why you chose the direction that you chose?
Yeah. Well, like most things in life, I can't really tell you I chose that point. Things kind of, I guess destiny happened and I kind of fell into it is the better answer. I'd be lying to you if I told you I pulled out a chalkboard and methodically wrote all these things out and came up with this grandiose plan and executed on it. I was one of those guys that just showed up day in and day out and put in a ton of work. And you know that old axiom, the harder I work, the luckier I get. That was kind of the epitome of my career in life. So, rewind back to when I got started in the business as a realtor, it was 2002. I was making 100, 150, 200 cold calls a day, knocking on doors. I was 20, 21 years old at the time, and I was loving it. And one day I made a cold call, and I'll never forget it. The guy's name was Jurgis Mikalonis. And I called him about a duplex on 1753 East Erie Street in Long Beach, California. And he said, yeah, well, why don't you just buy it? And I thought, buy it? I didn't have a credit card. I really had no capital. I had no credit, no anything. But luckily for me, it was the day and age where anybody could get a loan. They had these ninja stated income loans, no income, no verification. And I was approved. And this guy sold this property to me at a below market price. I purchased it. Subsequent to that, made some renovations, rented it out, and sold it a year later for about 350,000 more than what I paid. And at that moment, I thought to myself, why would I be a realtor? I'll just keep doing this. And that's exactly what I did.
So
So
how
that
many times did you do that?
probably 15. I wouldn't say the margins were that sweet on all 15, but I had a less than scientific approach when I was flipping houses. And I'm sure you could appreciate this. I showed up every day. I had a couple guys that were calling with me. I was paying them as salaried employees, and we were just grinding. And we changed our approach from I'd like to list your property to I'd like to buy your property and you don't have to pay a commission. Again, we did around the range of 15 flips. And my strategy is buy them so far below market value, you can't really get hurt. And I really didn't go into these houses and do any renovations of any kind at all. I just bought them right. And the day it closed, I put them up for sale and another wholesaler bought them from me and I made a good spread. That was my strategy. It all came back to sales ability and putting in the work. And I mean, sound familiar? That's how we built Crystal View.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's fast forward a little bit. When did you start buying assets that you were hanging on to for a little bit longer? What were those assets? What was the
Yeah.
calculus behind that decision?
Yeah. So subsequent to those home flips, what I did and what I thought at the time was this is great. I'm doing reasonably well. I would love I love the concept of owning commercial real estate that throws off a passive income where I don't have to show up day in and day out, week in, week out, where these properties just throw cash flow off in perpetuity, essentially. So I kind of got involved. I took my same approach and my same strategy around the calling, had that whole team of callers. It was a lot of fun. We were all in our early 20s. And we were just showing up, grinding away. And we just got a new set of lists. We got commercial properties in Southern California. So multifamily, office, retail, industrial. And we just called mom and pop owners all day long. And we just fired LOIs and offers out, just like we do today. Slowly, methodically put a couple deals together, manage them myself, kind of how we do today, and did reasonably well. And I always wanted more cash flow. And then I kind of stumbled. Again, it's not this grandiose plan. It's just you kind of stumble upon these things. I stumbled on storage and mobile home communities at that time. And I noticed that they threw off more cash flow than any other asset class. So I was kind of dabbling, like, okay, let me call these. And most of them were in Southern California. I bought my first park in Anaheim, California back in '06. So I've been in this business officially for 20 years as an owner. I remember the address too. It was 520 West Romney, and it was very close to Disneyland. It was a small park. But what I did is I executed a strategy which is very similar to today. I went in, I bought the park right. I made a lot of improvements, new roads, new infrastructure, brought the rents to a more market level. And then I sold that park a couple years later. And I think I doubled what I paid for it. I really liked the asset class. It was an inefficient market. There was really that non-institutional ownership, very fragmented, mostly mom and pop owned and operated, which I could align to more. And then I thought, man, what if I went across the whole country and tried this? And that's exactly what we did. We went outside of Southern California. And when I say we, it was, me and two other guys, and my wife Jess was calling too. We went throughout the country, and we started calling all of these storage, all of these mobile home parks, and just followed the same exact approach. And some of the assets we bought back in '08, '09, I still own today. But it was just a fantastic time to be in the business. We entered before any of the institutions did. There really wasn't much capital. It was very illiquid, but deals were everywhere. It was like shooting fish in a barrel. It was so good, I decided to build an entire career off of it.
Yeah. How were you raising capital back then? How were you financing these deals?
Bootstrap. A lot of the owners, not a lot, all of the owners were seller financing for us. And what we would do is we would find second trust deeds, second mortgages, mostly high net worth people in Southern California that I built a relationship with through cold calling. Incidentally, a lot of them were people that I bought their home and flipped their home, or
Wow.
some of the commercial properties. They liked the way we did business, that we were honest, that we kept our word. And they said, hey, I would like to invest in what you do. And I'm retired. I'm looking for a certain level of yield. We didn't have a fund at that time. So what we did is we offered second trust deeds. I provided a personal guarantee on those. So we'd find a mom and pop owner that was willing to sell on seller financing terms. Let's say we needed 30-40% down. I'd go and get the second trust deed for the 30-40%, effectively buy those deals with no money down, go in there, execute the strategy, get the rents where they belong, invest the capital, do all the things, same stuff we do today. Once we stabilized it, go back to the bank, refinance it, pay off the second, pay off the first, and then own the asset. That was the strategy. And you could do that back then because, you were buying these things at 9, 10, 12 caps. Very unlike where they are today.
Yeah. That's really interesting. And then I guess another kind of pivot point in the road for you was launching Crystal View and launching kind of this fund model
Yeah.
here. What was the inception of Crystal View? How did you decide to go from kind of these single assets that you were scooping up, that you were buying yourself, maybe that you would hang on to for a long time, maybe that you would sell quickly, but how did you then decide to structure and then launch Fund One?
Yeah. It was just, I never had enough capital. There was so much deal flow. If only I had the capital I had today back then, man, it would be game over. But I didn't. I was always scraping for money, and deals were everywhere. And I thought, what if I created this concept where I could raise equity, and use that equity to really buy these deals and execute on the strategy the same way I did personally, but within a private partnership arrangement. And, this thought crossed my mind and I looked into it, studied it. Obviously, there was no chat GPT, there was no AI. So you were doing Google searches and kind of came across a course at that time that kind of showed you how to do this and bought the course, researched it. This was back in 2013. And then we launched it in 2014. I said, I'm just going to go for it, and it was, had no capital, no relationships. I had my own capital, which was very limited, but kind of went out to the marketplace and said, this is what I want to do. And went to different business relationships that I had pre-existing. Some of these folks that had seconds with us, we went to. They turned around, invested in the fund. A lot of sellers that we purchased properties from, because we were constantly delivering good returns to them. They were some of our seed investors in Fund One, did the typical dog and pony show, and then slowly built it up, bought some great deals, started making distributions. Word spread. I mean, there's no better way to raise capital than to deliver. When you deliver, they'll find you. So we delivered, and we delivered in spades. That capital came in. We continually serviced those new limited partners. Word spread more. They would re-up. They'd tell their friends and family. And it was kind of like a snowball effect. Really cascaded nicely, and took us, believe it or not, a couple of years to raise 10 million bucks on that Fund One. But the story. We really executed well. Our IRRs were in the mid 40s, and when you go and launch your next fund, because of that performance, it becomes easier and easier to raise.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. That's interesting. I'm curious, you mentioned the snowball effect here and just knowing you, and knowing your history of studying Warren Buffett,
Yeah,
right? And his kind of thoughts around the snowball effect. I'm
yeah,
curious if you could just share with us your mentors maybe, or
yeah,
people that you really looked up to. Of course, Buffett. I mean, we all kind of look up to him, but were there other folks along the way that were either there with you tangibly or, sorts of these thought leaders that were in the space that you read and
yeah.
researched and modeled, their methods?
There were, and let's stop for a second and talk about Buffett, because I think that one is so important before we gloss over it. Because the way that he formulated his, it was called BPL, Buffett Partnership Limited, is before he bought Berkshire Hathaway, he was essentially doing what we're doing today. He was a private hedge fund before the term even existed, in Omaha, Nebraska in the early to mid 50s. So he was so ahead of his time. But what stood out to me from everything I read about him and his biographies, and just researching him, he really made a conscious effort of structuring those partnerships where there was a true alignment of interest between him as the GP and his partners as LPs. And he invested a significant stake of his own capital. And for those of us that know Buffett and what he's about, he was all about compounding. So he took all of his fees, all of the returns that he generated as a GP, and he rolled them back in as an LP. And he had a very strong alignment of interest with low fees in those funds. And that's how I wanted to set my vehicles up. And I always vowed to myself, I'm just going to roll those fees back in, especially if you believe in what you do, you believe in the strategy and your ability to execute. You're going to build this snowball effect and this compounding machine if you roll your fees back in. And that's what I've always been disciplined and dedicated to doing. So he was the inspiration behind how the vehicles were structured. And for me personally, to take a very large stake as an LP was basically influenced through what he did back in the 50s through BPL.
Yeah.
Um, so I just wanted to put that out there.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah. And who else, has
Yeah.
kind of been on that list for you?
Yeah. So there was another guy, his name was Scott Scheel, and he was in the Cleveland area. And this is kind of how I got very fascinated and intrigued by commercial real estate. I remember I went to a wealth expo in LA back in '06. And actually, Donald Trump was the keynote speaker at this time.
Wow. Okay.
And there was one of these breakout sessions, and this guy had this platform called the Commercial Property Academy, and it taught you how to invest in commercial real estate. And the person that ran it, his name was Scott Shield. It was his company, and listened to him, and it just made complete sense. It was so simple. He talked about controlling your own destiny and forcing appreciation on an asset without being beholden to a market or somebody else for that value to come out, where you could internally look at a property and really drive NOI through your actions. And that really resonated with me, where you could take your revenue, where you could cut your costs, and then basically grow your NOI. And when you apply a market level cap rate, there's a spread that's generated through what you did. And I love the idea of controlling my own destiny. And it's one of our mantras today, as you know, rather than depending on market conditions, we want to control our own destiny. And he was the one that kind of taught me that. And I would say he was a mentor for a number of years, bought all his courses, would go to his events. But it just, again, the concept, how simple it was and how you could buy an asset right and you could execute and drive value, and how you could internally control that property's value and cash flow. He was the one that really instilled that within me. So I took Buffett's concepts around the partnerships. But even before both of these guys, there was another mentor, and he was in the sales training program. Rewind back to when I first got into real estate as a realtor. His name was Mike Ferry, and he was a sales trainer. And it was really interesting because when I came to Southern California, when I tell you I didn't know anybody, that was an understatement. I really didn't know anybody. And I remember I came into this Coldwell Banker office in Los Alamitos, California in 2002. People were there. And I remember there was like these soccer moms, and they were driving like these S-Class Mercedes. And I'd think, how are they doing this? And I'd ask them, we do open houses, and we use our relationships and all the friends and parents we meet at PTA meetings. And, I'm a 20-year-old, 22-year-old kid that wasn't available to me. And I'm like, well, that won't work for me. And, you're kind of stumbling around. I went into the broker's office, and there was these sales training programs, inside sales by Mike Ferry. And it was all about direct phone prospecting. He was from Southern California, but believe me, this guy was as much of a New Yorker as you'd ever meet. He had that attitude, and that resonated with me, obviously. And I could align with him. And he would talk about, don't be emotional. Treat this as a business. Show up, make a certain level of contacts every day, be disciplined. And that's how you're going to win. And something about that really, like, I could connect with that level of thinking. That's how I've always been. And I said, okay, I'm going to apply this. I'm going to show up every day. I'm going to make the 100, 200 contacts. In fact, I'm going to make more than anybody. I have no dependence. I have nowhere to be. I could show up for 8 or 10 hours a day and just grind. And that's exactly what I did. And I didn't know anything about real estate. I didn't know how to sell it, but I did know I could outwork everybody. So I really leaned into that, started building up leads, following up on those leads, going on listing presentations. And there was a time, I didn't know where I was going to get my next meal. There was a time where I didn't know where I was going to sleep, but I didn't want to give up. And I kept grinding, and eventually a deal went through, and then another deal went through. And then you went from a place of being dead broke to you got a couple $100,000 at a very young age. And it was directly attributable to what I learned from this guy, and that discipline and that sales approach, and being, direct contact with people rather than a passive sales approach. It was a very aggressive one. And it's still one that we follow here at Crystal View to this day. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I would say those were my three mentors, along with obviously my father, hardest working guy I know, still in the restaurant business, showing up day in and day out. He's always inspired me. And a lot of the things that I learned from him as a kid, I apply here, and namely the lack of hierarchy, where he would come in, something falls on the floor, he'd grab a mop bucket, he'd start mopping it up, he'd sweep it up. There was nothing below him. And I wanted to make sure, even to this day, there's nothing below me. And that sends a message to the people that work with you that if they get high on their horse or they, hey, I've got this name on my door, or we have this, we don't have a hierarchy. We're flat and we're all a team and we show up together and we execute real hard on a daily basis as a team. And that's the culture. That's how we're going to win. So I kind of took all these different unique people and what I've learned from them and kind of brought it together in this brand of Crystal View. That's what you got here in front of you today.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of leads into, something that I can testify to and see what you're talking about of the flat organization that we have. And even, how you have allowed people both in person and, folks who just put out content and you consume that content to mentor you. I've seen you step in with my team, the acquisition team, whoever it is at the company, and really go arm in arm with them and teach them along the way. And so I'm curious, we'll talk about Crystal View and where it's at today and how we've scaled over the years here in a moment.
Yeah.
But I want to zoom in on that a little bit because I think that's very, very unique, right? That you are in the trenches, and let's use the acquisition team and even Cam as an example.
Yeah.
We're unique in the space because we've got our own acquisition team. We're not dependent on brokers to buy deals. We know what the brokers are selling, right? We keep tabs on what's out there on the market. But that acquisition team is one of the game changers for us in the space. And you really mentored that team. You mentor those guys individually. Could you speak to, I guess, what that looks like, how you have set that team up intentionally and how you mentor someone, say, like Cam? Let's
Yeah.
use a real world example. Cameron on our team.
That is my first love in this business is selling and being in front of people and doing great deals. That was kind of the impetus to do what I've done from the outset. I wouldn't say I had a finance background, nor did I have a management background. It was really built with the sales background. That's what kind of created the entire company. Now I learned these other skills and other abilities throughout the way, but that was all I had in the beginning. So again, I would call it my first love, you know. So when I find like-minded people that are willing to put in that work, that have that talent, and I like to pride myself as having an eye for talent. And that's why we have such incredible people that work for this company, that we all work together. He really struck me as somebody that was willing to put in that work, that had that talent that we could groom and we could go places with him. And I wanted to take him under my wing and meet with sellers with him and show him, hey, this is how I'm going to communicate in this circumstance. And these are the pitfalls that you need to look out for. And this is how you underwrite a deal. And this is what you have to be careful about. Kind of all of those things has made him very successful. And he's getting, light years better on a daily, weekly, yearly basis. I think in a year or two, he's going to be just as good as I am. And think about how dangerous that will be for this company. When you have more people like that, that really enhances the brand and the culture and the team, because I know that some of the concerns investors have are key man risk. But when you have people that have been cultivated and built from the ground up at a company, I always find that building people from the ground up are so much better, so much stronger, align so much more with the culture than finding somebody that has all of the right accolades and went to all the right universities and has the perfect resume. That has seldom, if not ever, worked out for me. It's always worked out when you find people that are smart, enthusiastic, they're willing to work hard, and they fit within the culture. That's how we built this company. And he's the epitome of that. And he's really building that department out in an incredible way. And that's why our deal flow is so strong. That's how we were able to deliver alpha to our investors, because to your point, we're not out there competing with the other buyers. We're controlling our own destiny.
Yeah. And a little bit of a spin, you just had me thinking about building those people from the ground up, and that's what you really value and appreciate. And it also brings a sort of culture and mentality of people who want to be in the trenches and want to be built up. right? Stack
Sure.
some weight on my shoulders. Let's go arm in arm. Let's go and find this. But the thing that also matters, I think, internally to us is having a founder-led company, right? We've talked about this a lot, and I know that you were just out in California with a group of highly influential individuals, let's call them. And you're talking about the market in general. You're talking about up and coming companies, and just the standout companies are the ones that are founder led most often. You're not just hiring an executive suite, right, to nurse something that's already there. You have not just skin in the game, right? But this is everything for you. This is your child. This is your name, and the sort of culture and mentality that that brings to our team. I know that we really appreciate kind of being under you. So thanks for that. It definitely brings a unique angle to what we're doing at Crystal View, not just, hey, we've got to manage what we have and manage it well, but hey, we've got to strive to continue to manage, grow, produce for our people because this is who we are. It's something about our identity and the core of our being.
That's right. I think, you say a couple very important things there. When you're founder led and you built it up from the ground level and it's your baby, that there is no plan B. It's not like you're a hired gun and you pull the ripcord when things don't work out and find another job. It's this or nothing. You know what I mean? And that you're willing to fight, you're willing to scrape, you're willing to do whatever is necessary to be successful and to put yourself in a position where your team is successful, your employees are successful, your investors are successful. That's my job. And I'll work tirelessly towards that. There is nothing else. So I think whether you're investing in Crystal View or you're investing in some venture fund, whatever you're investing in, you really got to find the passion, somebody with the discipline, with the heart, and that they're all in. They're all in, and there are no options. I think when you invest in that type of jockey, I'm not going to say you're going to win every time, but I'll tell you, you're going to win a lot more times than if you just find somebody with the accolades.
Yeah.
So, and
Yeah.
that's how we've built it. That's the only way I know how to do it. I don't know how to do it other ways.
Right. Right. Well, I know that our investors appreciate that. You're talking about building that team and scale. I'm curious, over the years, you have slowly and methodically built up and scaled the Crystal View brand and the company and our property management wing, Osprey.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm wondering if you could speak to the challenges with that, right? We're in 31 states right now that
Uh-huh.
and have over 200 employees. That's a lot. That is a
Yeah.
lot, and you've built that up over time, and you've done that intentionally, and not everything has gone to plan. Could you speak to that? Could you tell us that story?
Yeah. So when I got started, rewind back 20 years when I got started in the business as an investor pre Crystal View, I was buying these assets out of state. And in the beginning, I hired a third party property management company with the hope that these people would manage the property effectively. And I had just nightmare stories that came from that, where there was theft and there was negligence, and they just flat out didn't care, these third party property management companies. And I love the idea of investing in these assets. I saw a ton of potential, but to be beholden to somebody else, to put my hopes and my returns in the hands of another man or another woman just wasn't me. I had to control that process because I don't know, maybe I was egotistical or maybe I was naive. I didn't think anybody could do it better than me. So I decided to do it myself and started my own property management company just for my own assets. Built the team, built the infrastructure. Sherry, who was our employee number one, kind of came in during that time. She started with us in 2011 in my garage at my house here in Vegas, and she was instrumental in building up the asset management arm and the property management team, from nothing essentially. So we slowly and methodically and thoughtfully, started building that team, bringing in the right people. And when we acquire an asset out of state, we would either keep the existing team that was there or bring in a new team. But to answer your question, a lot of brain damage, a lot of energy, a lot of systems implementation that happened over the past 20 years and really refining those processes. In the beginning, they're really so in this industry, which makes it unlike office, retail, industrial, you can't really hire a CBRE. It's a very much cottage industry. It's very nuanced, and you kind of have to create your own systems. And we did that through trial and error over through fire for the past 20 years and really have refined those systems. And we've got a platform to bring in homes and sell them quickly, to market those homes for sale, to monitor our budgets. Now we're overlaying AI into what we're doing, as you know, which is really, really enhancing profitability, growing NOIs a lot more than we have in the past, having full visibility in your operations. So, you had to deal with a lot of people. You had to get a lot of black eyes and bruises, but we've got the right people in the right seats and the right systems in place where now when you bring on a new asset, I don't want to say it's seamless, but it's pretty close to it. In the beginning, when you have two or three assets and you bring on five, it's a lot of work. Now, if you bring on five with all the systems and people we have, it's very easy to scale. So the hard work has been done. The plumbing is in place. Now it's just kind of tacking and bolting on new acquisitions and executing as we have in the past. So it's been a long run to get to this place, but it was definitely worth it because I feel like we have something that's unique compared to the rest of the market. As you know, a lot of our peers and competitors don't do it this way. They do put their hopes and desires into another man or another woman's hands. They hire a third party property management company, and I think that would be a disservice to our investors.
Yeah. As we look out at folks to our right and left at our competitors, I think they're doing that. They're waiting for deals to come to them. I think that's a big thing that we don't have the time to do that.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you're not going to find great deals that way. We're not going to just wait around. And then also, they kind of just wait for appreciation along the way. You
yeah,
were talking before about
yeah,
forced appreciation. A lot of folks are just saying, "Hey, what broker is coming to me this month? We've got a little bit of capital that we can deploy. We got a third party property manager out there, and if everything falls apart and doesn't really go to plan, well, at least the market might recover in real
yeah.
estate one day, and we can ride that wave." We don't think that way, right?
It's
I'm
all
curious your take there, and take on the market in general, because that's an ever-changing dynamic, and we're seeing the negative fruit of that mentality really being reaped here over the past couple of years. Frozen distributions and companies folding, unfortunately, but it's because they've been kind of resting on those laurels a little bit. I think some debt situations too, but that's pretty broad. I mean, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so a couple things to unpack. Again, controlling your own destiny. To go out there. We've always been the action-oriented shop. We've always been super aggressive. We've been labeled many times as the most aggressive shop out there in this space, and I take that as a huge compliment. Because we're not going to wait for it to come to us. We're going to go get it. And we're going to go get it in every aspect. We're going to go get the deal. We're going to manage the deal effectively. We're going to find the best talent. We're going to retain that talent. We're going to go out there and aggressively find the capital and find the best investors and build those relationships. That's always, back from day one when you were asking me, how did we build it up? It was through that aggressive kind of approach, and nothing has changed. We've just scaled incredibly, but the philosophy has remained the same, and it always will. I don't think I'll ever take a passive approach and sit back and hope and wait. Hoping and waiting is not a strategy. Going and getting it and ensuring that it's successful is. I think that's the difference that makes the difference. As it pertains to your second question on the market, I think back to Buffett, he had a quote or an axiom that would kind of categorize what you just said. And it was that a rising tide lifts all ships. In the era of 2, 3, 4% interest rates, anybody could buy something and do well. You know, you didn't, you kind of just, you were successful despite yourself. But in this type of market, if you don't have a better flywheel and if you're not out there aggressively going and getting it like we're talking about, it ain't going to work. You're going to have these frozen distributions. You're going to have the inability to refinance assets because you bought them with the idea of, oh, 2, 3, 4% interest rates are always going to be here. And, 3, 4, 4.5, 5% cap rates are always going to be here. Well, we know they're not. And if you can't influence a property's value from your actions, then you're dependent on the market. And if you're dependent on the market, you're effectively trapped, like a lot of these sponsors are. And I never wanted us to be trapped. I always wanted to be that value add player that bought the deals right with discipline, went out there and aggressively executed the business plan, grew NOI. And even if interest rates went up, which we know they did, we still are generating strong returns. We're still, hitting the prefs on most of our funds. We're still making very, very strong distributions to our investors. And that's why, I'd like to consider ourselves one of the premier operators in the space.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, the fact that so many of these groups went out and got these floating rate, bridge debt, whatever it was, and then what's the other side of Buffett's quote there? It's when the tide goes out, that's when you see who's swimming naked,
Right.
right? And we certainly have seen that now.
And it's not a
Um,
pretty picture for some of
it's
these folks.
it's not. Yeah, we want to be in that in that old school swim outfit that, basically has sleeves all the way up.
That's
I
right.
think it certainly has revealed a lot in the space lately. I am curious your take here because we're seeing more product become available to us, which I think is pretty unique. I'm curious your take of why that is now. And we're
Yeah.
buying off market from mom and pop owner operators. But I think there's some interesting demographic trends there that's causing that. A lot of our mom and pops are older, right? They're retirement age. They're looking to exit. That's kind of that silver tsunami that many folks have heard about in terms of small businesses in the United States exiting. It's that same principle with the product that we're buying on the MH and storage side with those mom and pops. But I think there's some other reasons why we're seeing more action now. So I'm curious your take there. And then I'm curious, what do you think is going to happen? No one's got a crystal ball, but what do you think is going to happen over the next year or two? What are the opportunity sets that you see?
Yeah, great questions. Let me try to tackle why the deal flow in the pipeline is probably, well, not probably, is stronger than ever. As you know, we've got $100 million of opportunities that are either under contract or late stage contract negotiation. And I think the reason for that is just how intentional we've been on our acquisitions team. You mentioned Cameron, that talent, cultivating that talent, really refining our database. The AI has been instrumental. We've built up some intellectual property through our database, and that AI has really allowed us to kind of comb through and find those ideal targets without giving away too much information. In the past, it was, let's say you had 5,000 targets. You didn't really know which ones you should be talking to at any given time. With AI and the value of the information in the database that we've built over the past 2 decades, we know almost exactly who we need to be in front of every single day. It's just made us that much more dangerous. Being in front of the right lead at the right time, we have our hat in almost every ring on every sizable MH deal that's going down in the industry right now. We're not going to buy them all. We're going to pass on the majority of them. But guess what? We're at the party to almost all of them. And that's why the deal flow is so substantial. That, along with that aggressive kind of approach, we're out there in the field, and you know that this because you've been there firsthand yourself. We get in front of the sellers to build that relationship, take them out to dinner, hear their story. And we've been intentional about doing that more so over the past, let's call it 12 to 18 months than any time in history. And that's the other reason that deal flow is so strong. When these folks are ready to sell, who do you think they're going to sell to? Somebody who's randomly calling them, or a broker, or somebody they feel is their friend that they've been talking to for many, many years, that's been out and heard their story. You've created a relationship where you're a peer almost rather than a salesperson. So I think the confluence of all of those factors has really lended itself to how strong our our pipeline is right now.
Yeah, and I've got this really interesting observation that I've made here, and it's the more that we have invested into AI as a company and as a staff, the more awareness that you get of not only the power and exponential effect that you can have with AI, but the things that might, as people, as human beings and individuals, the things that stand out to you, right? So, what I mean by that is people now are picking up the phone and they're asking the question, hey, are you AI or are you a human being? Right? Everyone seems to be rushing and using AI. It's really important, right? You've got to keep pace. You've got to have that edge. You've got to use the technology that's in front of you. Yes, but there's ways to really stand out from that. And one of those ways is the human to human connection.
Yep.
And it's that connection, especially with these folks who are, they're of the baby boomer population,
Yep.
and connection really matters to them. Family really matters to them. Really getting on their playing field, talking to their values and structuring a deal that aligns with those values. That's tremendously important. And while all these other firms have auto or robot dialers who are calling out, right? Or there's just someone who's just hitting the phones, who's not trained well, who's not really connecting with those people, showing up and taking someone to dinner. I mean, we're going on a tour here at the Midwest for our properties that we'd like to acquire here in the next couple months across the Midwest. Three of these properties we're stopping by and having face-to-face interactions with. That stuff goes a really, really long way with these people. It stands out.
Yeah, it really does. And not to get philosophical, but I kind of want to get philosophical because I
Yeah.
think this is very important to me. This is a conversation I actually have with my kids all the time. And in the newer generation, you see it, everybody's glued to their phone. It's all technology, it's all WhatsApp, Snapchat, text, email. What could I do to communicate with somebody without picking up the phone or getting in front of them? And I really have, I don't know, some skepticism about that. There's nothing like connecting with another human being. If I could tell you one thing that I believe more than almost anything, one thing that AI is never going to replace is raw human emotion. If you could connect with another human being, you're irreplaceable. AI could never displace you. And that's what we're talking about right here. That's what we're building. We're connecting with people at a raw human level. We're hearing their story. We're understanding what's important to them, what makes them tick, what their father was like, what their uncle was like, who built the community 30, 40 years ago. We're relating to that based off our past experiences, based off my family and what I've gone through being from the family business as well. AI could never take the place of that. You could text people all day long and you could send them text messages and Instagrams and whatever you want, but you're never going to be able to connect with somebody like when you take the time and they appreciate it. Like you said, when you take the time, you get on a plane, you go out there and you connect with them for a couple hours or a couple days. I'm not going to say you're going to get all of those deals, but you're going to get a lot of them. And guess what? A lot of people aren't willing to put in that commitment and that discipline and that time. And we love that because that's where we thrive. That's where we'll always thrive, especially when you think about the big shops. They don't have the time nor the inclination to sit on back porches and sip lemonade and listen to the founder's story. They're looking to write big checks and deploy a lot of capital.
Yeah.
But we're going
Well,
to,
I'm curious there, Matt, because this is a really interesting point, and we get this question from our sophisticated investors all the time,
yeah,
which is, hey, we've done a pretty good job of scaling, right? We're on our fourth fund. We're wrapping this fund here at the end of this month. We've got all these assets in the pipeline that we're buying into Fund 4. We've got all these plans for the future. How do you hold in tension the core identity of who we are, right? In sitting, drinking that lemonade, having those personal connections as a staff with one another, with our tenants, and with sellers while maintaining growth, right? And our growth goals
yeah.
and scale and ability. How do you view that? How do you keep those things in tension?
Well, they go hand in hand because if you don't have the relationship, you're not going to scale. It may look like, hey, you're being lazy, you're sitting on the back porch, you're sipping lemonade. But guess what? You're connecting with somebody. You're going to do a deal that nobody else is going to do. In my mind, that's the highest value, almost the highest value activity that you can do. It's not laziness, it's tremendously accretive to the organization. So I think it goes hand in hand building those relationships, and they go beyond our sales team and a seller. I mean, those relationships are between you and our investors, listening to their story and building that bond. It goes with our employees, it goes with our tenants, it goes with our service providers. I want to be seen and known as somebody who cares, that puts in the time, that puts in the attention to connect with people and to be a real business person rather than somebody who's just behind a screen somewhere that you only get electronic messages from that you really don't know what they're thinking or feeling. Here, you know what you're going to get because we're going to tell you. We're going to be raw. We're going to be honest. Not everybody's going to love that. That's okay. But with the people we do connect with and we align with, we could build a tremendous organization from, which we have in the past and which we will continue to do so in the future. So again, just to reiterate, those activities are the lifeblood of this company, and they'll continue to be that way. And I don't care where AI goes because nothing will replace that human connection.
Yeah, yeah. And I appreciate that it's on multiple sides of the business, right? It's on the acquisition side, it's on the investor side as well.
It's
And
between us. It's
yeah, exactly
between us
right.
right now.
Yeah, or sitting on planes, right? Going, chatting on the flight out to go and see a property or go to an investor dinner or whatever it is. Some of my favorite relationships that we have, and boy, there's just a lot of great, really interesting people who have sold to us, who we maintain relationships with, who are, LPs in the funds. But I was just talking with one yesterday. Candy, Candy.
Oh
She
yeah,
she actually sold us a property, right? She
sure.
721 exchanged the property into
Yep.
the fund in exchange for units. It's kind of like a similar to a 1031, not the same thing, but similar to. And now we get to maintain that relationship. We built that relationship through the sale of her property, and she contributed a part of it into the fund. And then now we get to continue to build a relationship with her for years to come via this fund vehicle, via her being an LP, and we've got this large return of capital that we're sending back to her, and it's just so fulfilling, I guess, career-wise, to look out and have those relationships. It means a lot.
Yeah, it really does. It gives us a sense of purpose and a meaning. It's more, look, there's nothing better than delivering great returns. That's what we're known for. That's what we're about. But when you could build those relationships, that sense of purpose and meaning, and you know this firsthand by being in investor relations, in the beginning when I was doing that stuff myself, when you would hear people say, "Hey, you're supplementing my retirement. You've changed my life. These returns allow me to pay for my grandkids' education and give back to my church more." I mean, that's tremendously gratifying. Look at the things we're involved in today with AIM, with God Forgives Foundation, all these different groups and philanthropies and foundations that we're involved in because of our ability to execute. There's kids that are fed, there's girls that are taken out of sex trafficking, there's orphans that now have a roof over their head or an education. I mean, that's amazing stuff. And it's tremendously fulfilling for me personally.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, Matt, I'm curious here as we kind of wrap up. This is a very interesting point, right? At Crystal View, we're wrapping up Fund Four. We're coming to the end of this fund. We've got about 25 assets in the fund. It's sending out cash flow. It is got some really strong acquisitions in the pipeline. I'm curious, what's your thought as far as where Fund Four is at today and your expectation, I guess, for closing these deals, what's in the pipeline, moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, feel really good about the assets in the portfolio. As you know, as our existing LPs know, we're still on a lot of these deals at the infancy stages of value creation. Over time, those NOIs are going to grow. I think we've underwrote a lot of these deals quite conservatively, and we're actually going to beat underwriting assumptions on these. The pipeline itself is very robust, 100 million plus. We're going to have a very sizable institutional quality asset fund once we're done. I think once we execute and stabilize the assets within this vehicle, we're going to have a lot of institutional trades that take place. You know, a lot of the REITs, a lot of the larger private equity shops, just because of the scale and the quality of some of these assets that exist within this vehicle, I'm very, very proud of. I'm proud of how our operations team has executed to deliver value. I feel good about our free cash flow. I feel good about how it's growing. I couldn't feel better about the future. I feel like we've really dialed in our team and our culture, our ability to source opportunities, our systems, our ability to deliver on the operations side, your ability to go out there and raise fresh capital and bring that into four and beyond, hopefully, as we discussed. It's really incredible to kind of see the maturation of the people that are at this company and the company itself since inception. So to answer your question, I feel exceedingly good about Fund Four, its performance, and what the future holds to returns and the outcome for our investors.
Yeah, yeah. It's we're under 30 days now for the capital raise, right? After close of quarter, we're not accepting new capital into the fund. We're off to the races, sending out cash flow from that fund. We will be on the road, I think, next week, looking at some of these assets that we have in the mix. This is kind of our Midwest portfolio, and just wanted to share some metrics because these are pretty stellar metrics here. So purchase price is well over $80 million across these Midwest assets that we're talking about in this portfolio, an 18% projected IRR approximately. Just a phenomenal IRR there, over a 2x MOIC. Now, this is over 1,500 pads. This is a lot, right? 1,500 pads, occupancy about 80%, and a significant amount of growth opportunity, right? We've got significant rents to grow. We're sitting well below market rent rates. There's a lot of optimization passing through utilities. You mentioned this before. The infrastructure is there, right? We've got the groundwork, the framework, the piping, the electric is all in place in our system and in our business plan. All we have to do is just it's rinse and repeat. It's hard work. It's
Yeah.
really hard work. It's blocking and tackling. It's tough, but it's not complicated. And this Midwest portfolio, I think, is a great example of, hey, we'll purchase these things, we'll very, very quickly add value to them, get those rents to the spot we want them to be. And then you mentioned their institutional quality. That's kind of what Fund Four is these larger parks, these really, really nice communities that and I don't think that people always understand the upside there because when we model exits within the fund, we kind of model those individually. But what people don't realize is when you aggregate these investments into a larger portfolio or a group and you sell that portfolio, you can strike a premium on that, right? Those really big firms, those big groups, they're looking for diversification. They're looking for something that's stabilized, that a little bit of risk has been taken off the table, and they're looking for scale, right? They need to deploy a lot of cash, and we can provide all of those things very, very quickly, and they pay a premium for that. So there's a big opportunity as we continue to grow to continue to aggregate assets together and to sell them in bulk, right? In these portfolios upstream. And along with that, Matt, I guess my final question here for us today is as you look out at the opportunity set in institutional capital entering the space and buying our product and funding what we're doing, as you're looking out at sellers and where they're at with kind of this silver tsunami, as you're looking out at continuing to scale, but holding in tension those relationships, where will we be 10 years from now? I know you don't have a crystal ball. I know it's tough. There's going to be a lot of unforeseen things that happen in the world, right?
Yeah.
But your ideal world is you're looking at a crystal view, the opportunity set in front of us. 10 years from now, who is Matt? What is crystal view?
Yeah. Well, I love you putting me on the spot on that. And I think it's a great question. I really do. First off, I think Crystal View is a brand that represents hard work. It represents transparency. It represents somebody who was constantly told they couldn't do something and wanting to prove the world wrong. And we've consciously constructed the team of people within this organization who who check those boxes, who fit that mold. And so to answer your question, Crystal View is more of that 10 years from now. I think we're going to scale and we're going to grow and we're going to bring more of those like-minded people together that honor that brand that we're going to build with. And we're not only going to build on the MHC side with or the storage side, but I don't see us as a one-trick pony. I think when you build that structure and that infrastructure, and you have that culture, and you have the right people in the right places, you could do this in multifamily. You could do it in buying businesses. You could do it in a number of different things. Look how Blackstone started. They started as a buyout firm, and look at them today. I'm not saying I have aspirations to be like a Blackstone, but what I am saying is when you have the ability to execute and you embody a certain culture, you could do that well beyond a mobile home park. And that's where I see us 10 years from now. And I see the people in this team growing that brand and that reputation where, we're scaling without my direct involvement so much. And we're executing even better than with having my direct involvement on a day-to-day basis. That's my goal, my dream, and my vision for this company 10 years from now. And where do I want to be? I want to be a visionary, and I want to be a cheerleader for the people that are out there executing. And I want to be more involved in giving back to my community and to my church and to some of the other causes, as you know, that I'm involved in. And I think that would be a lot of fun and very, very fulfilling. So those are my goals for 10 years from now.
Yeah. Thank you for letting me put you on the spot there. Well,
Yeah,
Matt, thank you for this conversation. I mean, this has been a lot of fun and just so grateful and so excited for where we're going, for closing Fund 4 out well, but then future opportunities and everything that's ahead of us. Thank you.
absolutely. Thank you, Ben.
Well, we are so excited to be able to offer a return of capital to our investors in both Fund 2 and Fund 3. And as you know, you have the opportunity to roll those proceeds in part or in whole over into Fund 4. Fund 4 holds over 25 assets, and we're coming up at the end of the capital raise here at the end of this quarter. So, Matt, I wonder if you could share a little bit about Fund 4, your thoughts there, and this opportunity that's sitting before folks.
Yeah. Well, first off, I just want to personally thank our Crystal View Capital Fund 2 and Fund 3 investors for trusting us over the past 5 to 10 years. It's been amazing. We're really proud of what we've done, the brand that we've built, the returns that we've delivered to our investors. And we see this as the last opportunity to get in and Fund 4. Not sure when we're going to have the next vehicle available, but it's a tremendous opportunity in my mind to get into a fund that's already cash flowing, that's got 25 assets, that's got a pipeline north of $100 million that we're going to be closing on in the near future. And I would invite you to join me and partner with me and Ben and the rest of our team as you have in the past. We really look forward to delivering for you. And thank you again for all your trust and support.
Yeah, so if you're interested in this, there's a button below. Feel free to just click the button. Just all you got to do is give us your name. We'll make this very, very easy for you. Just a quick signature, and those funds can automatically be rolled over either in part or in whole. So grateful for you as a partner, and we're excited to continue to partner with you here over the years.